other day I was sewing pretty late at night, as I usually tend to, and all of a sudden the question popped into my head: what is the ultimate historical fashion accessory? After some careful consideration, it dawned on me that I think, in my opinion, that it has to be the muff, or the hand warmer. All jokes aside, this video I'm going to explain to you a brief history of the muff, along with why I think of it as one of my favorite historical fashion accessories. I actually think that the muff is such an important historical fashion accessory that I'm kind of perplexed as to why it went out of fashion in the first place. Some individuals online have hypothesized that the reason why the muff went out of fashion is due to it being impractical, but later on in this video, I'm actually going to explain why I think that the muff is an extremely practical accessory. So a little bit of back history behind the hand muff. We have to travel to the 16th century to see where the origin is. It seems to have been introduced to the world of fashion around that point, and it continued to be a trend throughout the 17th century as well. By the 18th century, it was already an incredibly prevalent accessory, and some people speculate that in parts of the 19th century, it fell out of fashion as well. Looking at fashion plates and extant garments, I don't actually think this is true. You can pretty much find a muff throughout most of the decades in the 19th century. Definitely in the early 19th century, the muff was incredibly popular, and if you look at any Regency fashion plate that includes winter wear, you're bound to see a muff most likely. A little fun fact, muffs weren't exclusively only worn by women. There is quite a bit of evidence of muffs also being worn by men. For example, a paragraph written by Samuel Pepys on November 30th of 1616 states, "This day I first did wear a muff, being my wife's last year's muff, and now I have bought her a new one. This serves me very well." During the late 1700s and into the early 1800s, there was quite an etiquette around muff wearing. In fact, larger muffs were often seen as a sign of wealth. I think that this is because muffs were often either fur trimmed or made with fur. Although this isn't exclusively so, some muffs were also made from various fancy silks, and there are even some muffs that were made from feathers. Those have a pretty interesting look to them. But I think this is part of why you can see so many of these fancy pictures of women carrying gigantic muffs throughout the late 1700s and into the early 1800s. Also, because the muff does protect your arms, typically working women probably wouldn't have been carrying muffs around, and that's just because of the fact that they would be needing to use their arms to get their labor done. Past the 1820s, it looks like the muff already begins to shrink down in size, though to be honest, by the 19-teens, it already looks like the giant muff is making a bit of a comeback, so perhaps that trend wasn't really gone forever after the 1820s. There are photos of women wearing muffs throughout the Edwardian period, the 19-teens, and even the 1920s as well, and you can even find some from the 1930s and 40s too. I did a little bit more digging into photos, and I was also able to find examples from the 1950s. I'm not sure at what point the muff went completely out of fashion, as this isn't really my area of research, but I do know that back in the late 20th century, there was a trend of Laura Ashley specifically releasing some Edwardian themed clothes, and if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that she released some muffs too, so maybe they made a brief comeback during that period of time. It does seem though that by the 1970s and 1980s, more or less the muff had already gone out of fashion, even though technically in the 1980s fur was definitely very much a thing, but for whatever reason the trend of wearing fur muffs didn't also catch on. Now that you're familiar with a brief history overview of the muff, I want to dive into why exactly I think of the muff as an absolute essential historical accessory, especially for the winter season. A quick note, the outer material of the two muffs that I am featuring in this video, one of them is a faux shearling, and the other one is velvet, and both of these items were purchased secondhand. People in the historical fashion community are often faced with the question of what they should do in regards to fur wearing, and I personally think that of course everyone should do what is most ethical, but also what works best for them. I choose to wear fur that is only vintage, secondhand, or dead stock, and that's because if it doesn't get bought, then it's going to end up in the landfill anyways, and no new animals were harmed. How I see it is that the animal is already gone, and so there's nothing that I can do about that, unfortunately. And so I think it's important to appreciate that animal and what's left of it as much as possible. I personally don't condone the killing of new animals for fur production, but fur does have its place in history and it has been worn for centuries. Sadly, history is not always pretty. In fact, a lot of the time it's kind of horrific. So I try to make the best out of the situation and utilize what already exists in the world and just appreciate that animal's former existence. Additionally, newly produced faux furs can be really detrimental to the environment because of the fact that they're often made from plastic derivatives. And for that reason, perhaps a good middle ground or a compromise is to buy secondhand faux furs, especially for those that don't feel comfortable with the wearing of vintage furs. I want to make it clear that I am in no way judging anyone for their opinion or their choices on this stance. I just wanted to make it completely known what my stance on this topic is. So the very first reason why I find the hand muff to be a superior accessory is because of the fact that it's incredibly warm and comfortable. Obviously, during the hot summer months, you probably don't want to feel even warmer, but during the cold winter months or even the transitional periods like spring and fall, the hand muff can honestly be a lifesaver. Even just adding this one extra accessory can make it significantly easier to bear inclement weather. I consider it to be akin to wrapping your arms inside of a giant pillow, and that's basically what wearing a muff does feel like. The muff also automatically makes a garment feel more vintage or archaic. Because they haven't really been in fashion for many decades, wearing one with basically any outfit seems to give this automatically vintage feel. This can be actually a really quick way to take a very plain and contemporary outfit and turn it more into something with a slightly archaic flair or even for history bounding. Finally, I would argue that the muff is extremely practical. The reason why I think this is actually because of its versatility. Not only can a hand muff keep you warm, it's also a really easy accessory to hang on a special long necklace or a muff chain, and that way if you're just walking around, it can just stay there and it doesn't have to end up getting in the way. Then when you're ready to warm up again, you can just slip your arms into the hand muff and then you'll have an automatic source of heat. One thing I think too sometimes gets misconceived about the muff is that it's quite difficult to move your arms in and out of them, but that isn't the truth at all. Generally speaking, if your hand warmer isn't overly constricting, then you should be able to very effortlessly take your hands in and out of it. It's not like a finger trap or anything for your arms, so you don't have to worry about that. Some muffs actually even have built-in concealed pockets or special loops where you can hang a tiny purse and actually keep a lot of your items safe. I think of this as a really excellent way to protect yourself actually from pickpockets, because say you're walking around a very busy city where it's common for pickpockets to hang out. It would be pretty inconspicuous to keep your valuables within your hand muff, because I really doubt that they would be trying to steal something within an accessory that hangs from your neck. Additionally too, you can actually keep one of your arms in there at all times, and it helps to protect your belongings even further. It also makes it super simple to pay for anything if you're at a store, because you can just go into the pocket or the small purse and grab whatever you need. And finally, if you're waiting for someone and you're feeling a little bit tired, you can actually just use your muff as a pillow and lay your head down on it. It's super soft, and because your arms are there too, it kind of helps to support your head a little bit better, so it becomes a really warm and comforting accessory. Definitely perfect for a quick nap. I feel like once the world goes back to being able to travel again after this pandemic, having a muff on your arms in an airport could be an incredibly convenient situation. So tell me, after learning all of this information, do you feel like you're ready to join the mafia? That was such a bad joke. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned some new useful information about the hand muff. I definitely do think it's an incredibly underrated accessory, and I'm secretly hoping for a comeback. Be sure to leave in the comments down below what your favorite historical accessory is and why, and I'll see you all next Thursday for another video.